And we are live. There we go. Welcome, everyone, to another live networking event here on the 17thfloor.com. As a reminder, for those of you joining us or listening live for the first time, or maybe watching this in a recording later for the first time, the 17th Floor is an online community focused on the growing practice of human capital management, which gathers HR, accounting, and payroll professionals together for peer-to-peer engagement, education, and mentorship. We do this every couple of weeks. We get together to host one of these live networking chats featuring special industry guests, in which we and our members have the opportunity to chat about our experiences in uplifting businesses by elevating the well-being of our employees. My name is Sam Fiorella. I'm one of the community managers here on the 17th floor, and I'll be acting as your moderator again today. The pandemic, as we all know, has forced many organizations to work remotely, be that at home, hybrid, or this new hybrid thing that we're all talking about. If this year we are finally enjoying our social life back, most companies didn't request their employees to come back fully to the office, but switched to a hybrid work model instead. And others are still struggling with that means. And there's my organization here at Sensei Marketing is no different than that. In a highly competitive job market where workers are looking to reduce their commute now that they've gotten used to it, or maybe not even having to go into the office at all, more flexible work schedules is becoming more and more common and something we all have to deal with. Yet most organizations aren't ready for that, either in operation, in theory, or in their management styles. But it's becoming an employee acquisition and employee retention thing. So we need to kind of delve into this, I think. We've been skirting around this topic over the last couple of weeks and the other conversations we've been having here, but I thought it was time that we really get down and dirty and talk hybrid work models. And so to join us today, we've invited Paul Pittman, who is the founding partner of The Human Well, which was founded in 2003. It's a boutique consulting practice working with boards, business owners, and C-suites, both in Canada and internationally, on human capital initiatives like this. So Paul's led successful reward and HR teams at Massey-Ferguson, Laidlaw, Japan Tobacco, AngloGold Ashanti, and Alcan, on top of his work with consulting teams at Anderson, Deloitte, and their ilk. So welcome, Paul. We're glad that you're able to join us today.
Thanks, Sam.
And thank you. And of course, we always like to have one of our members. In this time, we were bringing back Kathy Hill, seasoned manager and 17th Floor Board of Advisor. Thanks for all your work in our community, Kathy. She brings in-depth knowledge and experience in human resources, payroll, benefits, pensions, investments, share purchases in multiple corporate programs, not just in Canada, but around the world as well. So I thought we have a really good mix here on the consulting side as well as in the practice side. So for those of you watching us live, feel free to ask questions or comment in the chat. If you're on LinkedIn Live or YouTube Live right now, we will try and get to those questions. If you're watching this on replay, you can always ask a question in the comments and somebody from our community will get back to you. But let's jump right into it. So guys, what the heck is a hybrid work model? I mean, before we actually get into the challenges of it and how we should be modeling it, I think we really need to talk about what does that even mean? Does anybody have a common definition of what a hybrid work model is?
Well, I think the one that's emerging is it's a split week between working remotely, most likely your home, but could be anywhere, and office. And the pattern seems to be 2 or 3 days on, 2 or 3 days off. That seems to be the definition that we run into most often with our clients and others. But for others, it means different things. So I think it's very important to get that definition sorted before you have any conversations about hybrid working. You both need to be on the same page because different definitions apply to different folks and different organizations.
I think it's important for the company to make sure that definition is, clear with the employees and everybody's on the same page. Because I mean, everybody's going to say, well, I think hybrid is 2 days a week. Well, I think it's 2 days a month, and I think it's 2 days a year. So I think, getting that mix of employee feedback to understand what your employees are looking for, and then setting your parameters is great, but make sure they understand we're all on the same page here.
And Sam, just one further thought. It's not to be confused with the 4-day week, which a lot of larger employers, particularly in Europe now, are piloting, and with some success with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a whole other subject of conversation, which comes into the concept of productivity. Where do you need to work, and how many days do you need to work in order to be productive, and for a company to achieve its goals, right? And I think we're going to touch on that in a little bit, but I'm glad that you referenced that. So let's actually get into then understanding that if we're using the baseline of a hybrid work model, meaning in the office certain number of days and wherever you want to work, a Starbucks or in your home the other days, whatever I guess is convenient to you. With that as our basic definition, whatever those combination of days are. This has all been evolving out of the pandemic. The pandemic caused us to all work from home, or the majority of us to have to work from home permanently for a number of months and in some cases years. And now with this return, this concept of hybrid is coming back into play, because we've learned in some cases that, employees can in fact work from home, and that it is possible. I still think there's not enough research to show, was it a productive experiment that was forced upon us or not. I think that still has to come, but it's definitely something that we're all having to deal with. I think one of the main questions I want to start with here is this here to stay? Like, are we managing this for the short term in terms of what hybrid is and how it works? Or should we be looking at this as we need to put in policies and process and management styles and practices for hybrid work environment, because this is it. This is how it's always going to be for us.
I think if you look back BC, before COVID, we were heading in this direction, and we hadn't embraced it enthusiastically as employers, but I would say most companies had some sort of informal work from where you want policy. And so we were heading in this direction, and I think resisting it, to be honest. I think for all the reasons I'm sure you're going to take us into, Sam, later, where is the resistance coming from now? And that hasn't changed. The resistance is still there. I think what COVID did was accelerate the whole process, and we had no choice. And if people wanted to have their folks continue to work, they had to work from home. They had to have, remote support and assistance. So I think, is it here to stay? Yes, I think this is an evolution. COVID just rushed it forward, and I think it has advantages for everyone. We've just got to figure out how to optimize it. What do you think, Kathy?
Yeah, I think I know in some cases, like I remember seeing a manager of a team of 200 engineers saying, okay, let's put a framework in here. Let's have 9 to 3 is the core hours. So if you're like the person that wants to come and work 7 to 5, great. You're the person that wants to work 9 to 7 or whatever the magic number is. That's the core hours, and let's not do meetings on like Monday morning and Friday afternoon. So it was kind of an adapting to the hybrid, but if you set some framework for people to work under, and then they can manage their expectations, I was pretty spoiled. I worked 4 days a week for the last 18 and a half years. So I'm not going to tell anybody that now because they'll be jealous, but it does work. And if you, have your deadlines, they may not be the same as the other departments. So, I think you can do it as a company, maybe focus and say, okay, if we're doing hybrid, maybe we're having engineering in Tuesdays and Thursdays and having other groups in other days so that everybody can mingle and, or have team Zoom type meetings for engineers where the Zoom's on all day and you're sitting in a room. So I think there's many various applications that can be used to make it easier, but I think it's a reality that, there's just a number of people that are saying, if you want me back 5 days a week, I'm not coming. I mean, we're getting that feedback from a lot of people because, they live an hour and a half from the office and they don't want to do it anymore.
That's interesting. So you guys are saying that while the pandemic didn't necessarily create this hybrid work environment, it just hastened a trend that was already happening.
Yeah, I think people were thinking that now. Like, I mean, I can, I have employees that said, look, I've got a sick grandparent or something and I needed a little flexibility. And I'd say, okay, well, we have a 30-hour-a-week option. Would that help you out? Like, they take the pay cut, they'd work 30 hours a week, but they were committed to that 30. Rather than being committed to the 37 and a half and struggling, trying to fit in appointments, etc. They then knew, okay, well, great, I'm going to be off on Fridays. I'll book my grandmother's appointment on Fridays. So I think there's a balance there to help the employees with their day-to-day struggles, but yet the company has to decide, if you're an assembly company, that may not work. So I think it really depends on the dynamics of the company, what their objectives are and how they work. If you're an agile engineering team, Zoom may work wonders, or voice, that type of meeting may be fine.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here because, work from this concept of telecommuting, what used to be called telecommuting, now work from home, was tested back in the 80s. Levi Strauss, Sears Holdings, if you remember when Sears was a thing here in Canada, JCPenney, American Express, IBM, they all tested this concept of telecommuting, and it was a big fad. And there was a lot of articles written about it, a lot of scholarly articles as well as news articles, and it lasted for a little while, but it didn't click. It didn't stay. You know what I mean? At one point, even in the U.S., federal agencies were promoting it and saying that this is the way that organizations need to move. Even President Clinton, I think, at one point put out a presidential memorandum, directing that that government was to start working this way as well. But it didn't stick. So what we as managers of organizations now, should we feel more confident that it's going to stick this time where it hadn't in the past?
Yeah, I mean, and Yahoo, I'd mentioned, that was the biggest reversal, and that's not so many years ago. It's probably within the last 10 years actually where they brought everyone back to the office again. But I think what caused the shift, Sam, is mobile technology. We've, as Kathy was saying, it was previously in a sort of accommodation. If you had an issue where you needed to be at home, we'd accommodate you and work something out. Now it's mainstream, and folks are making a stipulation of their working arrangements that they need to be at home. But I think that, what made a huge difference was mobile technology. Now we still haven't got it all, of course. I mean, once we get HDR quality screens and cameras and sound systems that put us all at the same level. And I think the biggest issue is before long, I'm sure someone's going to come up with a camera in the middle of the screen. To look into your eyes, I have to look up now at my camera, but I'm drawn to you on the screen. So there's little things like that are going to make it more accommodating. But we've been remote for 20 years, and I've never had anyone say I really would like to come back into the office. So it has, I think Kathy's right. It has to work for you. I mean, surgery is not going to work remote. Well, I suppose it could. A lot of surgeons are working remote.
It's actually happening.
Yeah. So who knows? And of course the growth of the internet has made things possible to do remotely that we just couldn't have thought of even 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think the workforce as well is having two kids that are in their 20s right now. I mean, I see my son Jeremy hitting the golf ball and then taking a call. You know what I mean? He's working, but their generation of that in the evolution, is a lot different than my generation. We wouldn't think that way, that you could be out of the office that long, etc. But now it's commonplace for them to expect to be anywhere. I'm driving to Toronto and I'm still on a phone call. We just don't think that way as our generation. It's like everybody in a room at a table having an agenda and we're having a meeting. But now that just doesn't seem to go from the generation that's in the workforce now. They're pretty flexible, adaptable. I can be, anywhere, anytime, pick up a call from you. I'll pull over to the side of the road or whatever. Like, they're very adaptable workforce now. And so I think it's not as big an adjustment for the newer generation than it is for the older. And I think from an HR payroll perspective, I know people would stop by my office, and they had something to talk about. They wouldn't hesitate to walk in the door and talk to you. They're more hesitant to take the time to pick up the phone to call me if they're having a bad day. But if they're having a bad day and they saw my door open, oh, Kathy's there, let's talk. I think it makes a difference in the service levels that you can provide to employees. Like, they're just more open to be able to walk in my door and say, Kathy, I got a problem with my paycheck. Can you help me explain it? But I don't want to bother her. I don't want to call her. You know what I mean? I think it's made a difference in how your service levels are being perceived.
And that's interesting. So I wasn't going to go here to the technology front, but just so quickly, but I think maybe we need to. Paul, you said, in that explanation as to why it's likely to stick now, whereas in the past, the old telecommuting, I'm going to guess that none of us here are under 30. So we'll all remember that telecommuting phase back in the day. And it didn't stick then because we didn't have the technology to enable it the way that we do today, be it Zoom, video conferencing, mobile phones, the prevalence of mobile phones, Slack, all of those types of collaboration tools that we now have available to us. So that's a good thing. But we're also finding that there's a negative side to that when it comes to HR practices and even productivity for that matter. I know that there are, people who are zoomed out, and that there's been a growing number of cases of people asking for time off and sick leave because of anxiety over Zoom meetings. So that's a growing area of issue. There's this whole issue around inclusivity now, where technology is that you're always on, and people are getting overly tired with that. And some people that are maybe feeling that they're always on, always on camera and in the spotlight, for people who are introverted that don't find that comfortable. Right. I had one person not want to say, I'll take your job, Sam, but I'll never be on camera. But we were working remotely in the middle of a pandemic. You had no choice but to be on camera. And she says, well, then I can't take the job because that's too much stress for me to be on camera all the time. So that's an issue. And conversely, I'm noticing that people are, Kathy, to your point, is that people say, oh, I got to make an appointment to call them because I can't just pop in. I don't know what they're doing right now because I can't see them. So if I want to have this conversation, I got to book a meeting and I got to schedule a Zoom call or something like that. And people are hesitant to do that, whereas they're not hesitant to just poke their head in your office. So things don't seem to happen as organically, and spontaneity is gone. So I'm hearing in our community that a lot of people are really complaining about that they're losing that spontaneity. They're losing the creative spark and innovation that used to happen from those ad hoc meetings that just used to happen in the office. So is technology actually going the other way and hurting us while it's enabling these benefits to apparently, but is it actually hurting us more now?
I think it's making it more difficult. If you think of a co-op that joins an engineering team, and they're sitting in their bedroom and they're working from their bedroom, or they live in a small apartment, that's their only environment now, is that little room. And, we found that some co-ops just, they weren't really enjoying the co-op term because they weren't getting that ability to, meet people face to face, to get the personalities. They always felt they were on a TV show. You know what I mean? That's the kind of feeling I'm on Jeopardy 101 if I don't answer the question right, sort of thing, so I think not having at least some, having the hybrid work provides that opportunity for that co-op to actually meet his team or meet her team and say, oh, that's who you are. Now I know you. And that opens the door for more comfort in reaching out to them, for example, I always said, when you put a co-op on a team, give them a mentor. Tell them that Fred is their mentor. Call Fred up, ask them what he's doing on Friday night in Ottawa. I think that's the way you've got to enhance the hybrid model, is to make sure the employees have opportunities to dialogue with people, not on a big show, but just one-on-one, so that they feel a comfort level of adapting to the team.
Yeah, and I also think it's worth just underlining at this point, we're talking about hybrid. We're not talking about folks working totally from home all the time. That's a whole different video call, I suspect.
Yeah.
But hybrid, I think, is the most complicated of the three alternatives: all in, all out. Hybrid is the most complicated, and yeah, sure, people are going to get zoomed out, as they say, but we also used to get meetinged out. Remember those days when we were in the office all day, every day? We'd be up to here with meetings. So I think there's, there's different frustrations. And, I think you asked about technology earlier, Sam. One of the things that I think enabled this remote working to accelerate really quickly was video. But you don't have to have your video switched on. You can join a meeting and be just audio. Now, it may seem a little odd these days. It actually does feel a little odd, but it's an accommodation. So let's make all our folks feel more comfortable and happier, depending on what works for them.
Yeah, I've actually heard comments when I've been on a call with everybody, and it used to be completely, again, I'm not very young, so I remember like the conference calls where all day long you would have a conference call with 10 people on it and on the phone, and you would never think, well, I don't see these people, this is unusual. But I've heard many comments post Zoom calls. Well, did you notice that so-and-so wasn't on camera? What's he hiding, or what's she hiding? There's this inherent distrust now if you're not coming on camera. So again, it's this whole learning curve that we have to go through that I think is now trickling down to management styles and how we manage teams and how we set up our businesses, which we are grossly behind on. So if we're going to assume that this is here to stay and that a technology has enabled it, the pandemic has pushed it years ahead of maybe where it would have been otherwise. And the job market and employees are forcing it to be the way that it is. We're all going to agree that that's what it is. This is our thing. But this now means that we have business challenges, and from an employee perspective, an HR perspective, as well as a business operations perspective. So let's address what some of those challenges are and maybe what we need to be thinking of. I'm just playing off of one of the things that you said, Kathy, that I wrote down. Your son was on, I think, playing golf and was taking calls in between shots. I've been there. I've been on vacation as a business owner, and I was at Disney World, and between rides, I was taking meetings with and holding my daughter, trying to keep her in control while I was on a business meeting between rides, because that you're sitting there for an hour, right, in between while you get on a ride. There's an issue now of work-life balance, right, which is a big theme here in the 17th floor that we'd like to talk about with human capital management. And it's important, I think, as organizations to encourage that work-life balance. But this hybrid work model, even if it's only a couple of days at home, people feel that they're always on because they can pick up the phone anytime, right? Hybrid often means that if you need to go walk your dog or cut your grass at 1 p.m, that's fine, as long as you get your work done, and you're not impacting a client deliverable, and then work a little bit later or start a little bit earlier. Accommodating people means that people get the sense now, though, that they're always on. It wasn't post-pandemic or pre-pandemic. We were talking about policies of stopping people from emailing after 5 o'clock, right? And making that a company policy to avoid that and condensing the amount of time. Is this hybrid work model now kind of hurting us when in promoting work-life balance?
I think you can do some fun stuff. Like, let's use an example. Like, we at Christmas time, we would, as a payroll department, we'd adopt a family, and we'd work together to get, a group of things for a family. Well, I think in the hybrid workforce, it might be fun to have a cross-functional operation like that. Maybe you have 2 guys from engineering, 2 guys from HR, girls from HR, or whatever. Make them work together. So even though it's a hybrid environment, if you do functional activities that will have people from different sections of the company working together, I think that can help improve the communication aspect and to get to know people as well. So I think ideas like that to do cross-functional things would help smooth this out, and maybe not make people feel like they're always on, but they're, I'm working with Fred in engineering and Mary in HR, and I've never met those people. So that's a great way to make a bond build between different people in a hybrid environment.
Yeah, I don't think, I think hybrid work has created another opportunity for people being always on. But those were there to begin with. I mean, again, back in the office days when we used to switch the lights off at night, we'd go and kick everyone out of the office because they were working so late. So, there were still folks that wanted to be there and wanted to put those hours in. And there were folks that didn't, and those folks left, and the others stayed. And, it was them that I think we were worried about because, so as a leader, you've got to manage people's contribution, whether it's too much or too little, and balance it to get that work balance right. And whether that's hybrid or not, you have to make new rules to accommodate that. But I think the issues are the same. I mean, if you look at we'll come on to this, I know, but one of the things I'm advocating with our clients, if you are going to do this, make it permanent so people don't have that uncertainty. Be very clear that this is here to stay. This is not a temporary thing for when things get back to normal, whatever that is. And write your policies to make sure that people understand and have that confidence that this is a permanent thing. So one of your policies should be the right to switch off. And you should illustrate quite clearly, what the expectation is on employees about working past that period when they're required to make their contribution, and when not, and their ability to, even if you give them a company phone, their ability to switch it off and their right to switch it off. But I think, Sam, it raises another interesting issue, which I think that maybe a little more with the older generation and the young generation, but managing FaceTime. We tend to manage performance by showing up. And of course, remote work doesn't enable you to do that. And I think from that perspective, it's a good thing because we've got to let go of that. And we should never have grasped onto that anyway. It's all about productivity and what is expected from our teams and our folks individually. And are we giving them the tools, the time, and the ability, the capacity to meet those goals and objectives? And we don't need to see them. We don't need to be in the office all day to measure that.
Well, and I think that opens up the next topic, which I think is very important. There is a lack of knowledge and processes in management and organizations in general on how to manage to performance-based or results-oriented management versus task management, right? And I think one of the issues with hybrid work models or remote work models is that you are putting a lot of trust in your employees to go out and do their job when you can't physically see what they're doing day to day. I can't look across the room or out the window and see what's happening in the next office. So that's a challenge, right? And so when you try and manage you end up micromanaging people, like looking at, when they log in, looking at, what are their meetings, looking at every minute by minute in their time cards. If you're a time card based organization, that becomes almost punitive, and it becomes not a very good experience for the employee. But there's a training that has to be involved. So can we maybe start looking at, Paul, in your practice, when you're managing or you're consulting organizations who are moving in this, what training needs to be provided to management in order to get them to be able to better optimize or better maximize their employees' productivity in these environments?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure we know the answer yet, but here are the things that we try and get folks to talk about. We've all been taught to lead by huddling around the conference room table, and that was going to work sometimes, and you may create a hybrid work environment where we still huddle around the conference table and work on things that we need to collaborate on, work on things that we need to brainstorm. Where there's human interaction needed, let's get that screen out of the way and try and, really make that human interaction as productive as possible. And so that requires repurposing the office, because you want to make sure that people understand why they need to come into the office now. And for some folks, it's going to be, we'll just come in for some quiet time, get away from that. Get away from the bedroom, as Kathy said, and the kids and the dog, and come into the office with some quiet time. If you've got a work environment, outside that you can use, and that's fine, then work from home from time to time. But really now what we're saying is come into the office when we need to get together. I don't want to come in the office and talk to you on Zoom from the office. That's pointless. So we've got to repurpose the office and make sure that folks are in when others who they need to talk to and work with and collaborate with are in. And so that means a little more scheduling, a little more thought. In terms of leadership, I think we've got to think around how we take those huddling around the conference room to huddling around the screen, and making sure that leaders know and can spot circumstances or issues with individuals where they're not quite comfortable. The folks that don't want to be on screen all the time, that are uncomfortable with talking on video. And there's a lot of, I hear a lot of folks saying now, certain of their folks who were really quiet when we were huddling around the conference table have now found themselves on video because they're not seeing all the body language around the table that maybe made them a little more self-conscious previously. So we've got to teach ourselves as leaders to be aware of all of these things and develop new skills to manage teams and camaraderie and collaboration in a remote setting. I can attest that it can be done. I mean, we do it, and we've been doing it for a long time. So, and many of us have been doing it, but didn't realize it, of course. So there's those are the sorts of things, Sam, I think, where we're still learning.
Yeah, I know we moved from an annual review to just an ongoing sort of quarterly update with employees. And I think that in this environment is really helpful. Like if you can just say to, okay, Fred, 9:00 on Wednesday, we got 15 minutes, put it in your calendar and we'll just pick up the phone, we'll check in to see. And then that's the point where you can say, well, how do you think this hybrid is working? Do you have any concerns about it? But to keep that door open and to keep some type of committed time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something, that person feels like, oh, if my week's not going great, I have a chance to talk about it. So I think that's a management skill that is helpful in this type of environment. It's a little more open door commitment. And even if it's only every once a month, once a quarter, at least that employee knows that, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with my boss at that time. And it's not necessarily what I'm doing at work, but just, how's work going?
Yeah.
How's the balance going with the current, So I think if you have that opportunity with employees to just have an open door, if you want to call it, and it's a call, and it doesn't have to be video, it can just be, hey, pick up the phone and we'll talk at that day. I think that helps the employee know that they've got an opportunity to have an honest conversation with, if there's an issue, you don't like this current environment, what can we do to help you, to get through this? We've changed the work policies, etc. So give me your feedback. And the other thing you can do is before you get into changing into this hybrid workforce, get a consultant to do maybe a forum with a potluck of people, just picked out of the company. Because I think people think, I know what everybody's thinking, but do you? I think it's important before you make these new policies, nobody's really said, I hate hybrid work, but maybe even do an online survey where they don't, it's not identified by person, but you get the feedback. So before you jump into the hybrid model you're building, you get an understanding of what your population is truly feeling. So if you got 1% of people that don't want to go to the office at all, or if you got 47% of people, I think if you find that out before you build your new hybrid model, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. We've gone to quarterly reviews with our team here, and for a variety of reasons, and that's one of them. And part of what we're trying to do in our organization is not just check in on people, like what are you doing? What's the word I'm looking for? How are you doing on a personal level, and are you managing? It started with remote work. Hey, are you okay? We're just checking in on you. I can't see your body language. I can't see your face. We want to make sure that you're good. And we went to say, okay, now we're starting to realize that work from home means we need to shift to what I was mentioning earlier, which is this results-oriented business model. So we're managing people based on their results, not on their tasks. But the only way to do that is to make sure that everybody's working on the same kind of goal. Everybody understands what is this sprint that we're all trying to achieve, and making sure that all team members are working towards the same goal. And that's where these quarterly check-ins have really worked for us, to make sure that every quarter everybody knows what the goal is. And as long as at the end of that quarter our business goals are achieved, it doesn't matter where you did them from. We got our results, and it's taken the pressure off of us as managers to watch every hour and where they're spending that hour. We just check in, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve this quarter? And if we did, everything is good. There's no sense to have to go down into the time cards to see where people are doing their work. All right. So I think that there's a lesson learned here that I think, or lessons to be learned. There's so much we don't know yet, be it technology. Maybe if I can just kind of wrap up some of this, because there's no way we're going to be able to address every new training item that we're going to all need to know, be it, if I can just kind of sum up a little bit of what we've been talking about. We definitely need to understand that managers need to change the way they manage staff, and that there's going to be a learning, training thing there. So we have to start planning for that. Organizations need different processes, but they also need potentially a different business culture. We talked about that last or 2 weeks ago in terms of setting up a culture for this remote work environment and what that's like. And clearly, I think, Kathy, you made a really good point. Businesses need a consultant of some kind, somebody like a Paul, who maybe has had these experiences to help guide them and to understand what do their employees want, what works for the business. Do that training, show the employees what's important for the business, and then vice versa. And maybe together find some kind of a happy medium before you create those plans. That's a very good point you guys have made. But before maybe we wrap up, I want to ask one more question, knowing that we still have so much more to do, and there's so much more training that's going to be required. There's one thing that I've really been struggling with that I'd like to ask. When you do send people back to the office, even if it's only for a couple of days a week, I am hearing in our community quite a bit on the 17th floor is that it's almost punitive. Employees look at it as punishment, that they have to come into the office, even if it's only for 1 or 2 days. Whereas they were happy coming in 5 days a week before. And before we got live, I was telling you that for all of my career until very recently, living in the Greater Toronto area, I had a 1 hour plus commute, sometimes 2 hours each way every day. And that was part of and it was okay. I was completely okay with it. Now people are saying, well, why are you punishing me? Why do I have to come into the office 1 or 2 days? Am I doing something wrong? Do you not trust me? How do we change this perception so that coming into the office is not punitive, but that we don't have to incentivize it? Oh, come in, we'll buy you lunch. Come in, we're going to have muffins for you when you get here. Come in, we're going to have a party every other day. That's what seemed to happen, that we have to make it so positive as opposed to, hey, this is your job. How do we not make it punitive?
I think it goes back to this repurposing the office. We don't want you to just come in and hang out, which is what we used to do. We want you to come in for a purpose. And there's going to be a little more scheduling, and there's going to be a little more opportunity for collaboration and getting together and brainstorming things out. And maybe we're going to change the format of the office, to make that work and be more fun and palatable and more creative. Maybe we're not going to have offices anymore. Maybe we're not going to have cubicles anymore. Maybe we're going to have something else that will create this. And a lot of the employers that started to force folks back 1st of September, people came back and found a different workspace. It goes back to what works for us. What is the right culture for our company? And there's no right answer. There's no black and white on this. It's very gray, and it's gray all over. And folks are finding different models work for them and different combinations of hybridity, if that's a word. I don't think it is, but
you just made it one.
Yeah, and different combinations of office space too. And I think we've got to, I think one of the things you've got to teach yourself is if you're worried about covering the cost of your rent by trying to get people to come in every day, that's the wrong question. And there are accountants and folks out there who worry about this underutilized asset. And you've got to get over that. You've got to repurpose it. And if it's a smaller asset, even better. That works for everyone. So I think, Sam, is a long answer to your question, but make it more exciting to come into the office. I mean, think about this. I mean, folks have gotten used to being at home for 2 years, and we're now forcing them back to do what they did 2 years ago. But the world has changed. And they don't want to come in and talk to their colleagues on Zoom. So I've had 2 extra hours a day that I've either filled with work or filled with a pastime or a hobby where I was commuting previously. The money I used to spend on commuting, I've repurposed for my recreational life. And the social life, which centered around the office, has now been recentered elsewhere. And so, yeah, coming into the office does feel a bit punitive. I don't need to be there. I'm as productive as I was. My friends are all elsewhere. I haven't got the spare cash to buy that GO ticket or to pay the gas. So yeah, it is punitive. So make it exciting. Change while you're here.
Sorry, Paul. I think that you're right on by making the trip back to the office has to have some good thought out process. So that's person that's saying, I don't feel welcome, maybe help them be a focus at the meeting to say, okay, well, can you maybe lead that meeting or something? Give them some value to coming back into the work, potential growth. Maybe they're maybe they're a backdoor person and they say at the back door a lot. Well, give them a mandate to help them be more focused in the meeting, to be, well, could you give me an update on that project you've been working on? Can you let the group know what's the accomplishments you've done this week or something? So that helps the person feel like they're valued. And I think that's the important part. Just come back and have a general discussion at the office is really not going to make value in that. But if you have the person come back and give an update on that problem you ran into and how they solved it, and anybody in the room have any questions about it, then at least there's value to that person at that meeting. And I think that's the important part is you don't want just a general discussion. You want a meeting that's going to exchange ideas or plan something for, hey, we're going to have a team meeting because the next quarter we're going to try and achieve these 5 things. Does anybody want to jump on this particular one? Who wants to lead the team? I think that's where you get value from meetings if they're participative with the people in them.
I think it's funny, though, that when you do come into the office, you still see people communicating on Zoom. And one of the challenges, and I know we have this in my organization, so I'm talking from personal experience, we do have a hybrid work environment. We don't mandate that you have to come in every day, but we encourage it midweek, a couple of days a week. Some people do, some people don't. So even though the people who are here can get together, we want to include those that didn't make it into the office that day. So we still have half the people on a Zoom call. It's not particularly effective because they can't really read the room. They're not always getting their thoughts out properly because we're not always looking at the camera when, we're physically together. Those of us that are physically together are engaging off of each other. And we sometimes forget that there's somebody on camera to check in with them, right? So now do I have to force everybody in on the same days? It's very, I think one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation, other than we need to have another 2 or 3 sessions, is repurpose the office. And I think that's really important. And we're not sponsored here by, the co-working spaces, but co-working spaces, I think, are probably going to see a big boom because, of this idea of just hoteling. People will come in and use it for those meetings, use it for those collaborative sessions. And, so I think that's going to have to be a big, takeaway or lesson learned from people watching this is how do you repurpose your office so that you're not forcing people to come back, but you're giving them a reason to come back while they're there and turn it into something that is both productive and enjoyable and not just what they can do at home. Make it something that they can only do in the office that they're going to enjoy and then get their job done at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
I like that a lot. Okay, I'm going to give you guys one last chance. Anything that you wanted to say on this topic, I mean, within reason, because again, I know that this could be on for hours. But is there any one thing that you really wanted to say about this topic of, returning and how we should be doing it that we haven't had a chance to talk about? I'll start with you, Paul.
Well, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I think there's a sense, if you will, that this is temporary and it's COVID related. Well, it's not. I mean, it may have started with, we may be here because of COVID, but COVID's in the rearview mirror. We've already put the risks behind us, and we've concluded that those risks are manageable by us returning to a normal life. Now, there'll be some folks that are super exposed to infection, and we've got to manage that for sure. But that's, an accommodation. But for the majority of folks, that risk is now behind us. And so this is not about responding to the virus. It's a new way of working. And so if this is right for you, make it permanent. Make it very clear that this is not temporary. We've repurposed the office. We've got new policies. We've got extended policies. We've got ability to put better equipment into your office away from the office. We're worried about ergonomics because there's going to be an effect on benefit plans and mental health and all those good things. So manage all that stuff, but make it permanent. People then get a sense of security and confidence. And this is an arrangement that I can buy into for the long term. That's going to help keep retention up and turnover down. So think about it from that perspective. This is not something where we're doing as a sort of sideline to what we were doing previously. This is a whole new thing, and embrace it because everyone benefits.
Mm-hmm. Great point, Kathy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, in my eyes, it's kind of like you're baking a new cake and you want everybody's ingredients to be in the cake that they're going to enjoy. So you have to find out what people like, and you have to try and address what you can do, to make everybody feel participative in that process. So make sure you get the feedback from employees. I don't like chocolate, I don't like white, I don't like strawberry, whatever. You need to get to your employees to understand what their issues are and work as a team to try and come up with a creative solution. Like if we're going to have engineering in every Wednesday, that's the new rule. Make it well known, and then people will buy into it as long as you're all, you've all talked about it. And you're always going to have people that, don't want to do things, but then you've got to work with those people one-on-one to try and help them get through the process. But once you've made the decision, everybody's going to have that cake on the Friday, or maybe when they arrive that first time back to the office, I'm going to have the cake ready to go.
Yeah, valid points, all of you. So thank you to both of you. Paul, on behalf of Kathy and our entire 17th floor community, thank you for being our guest today, and we really appreciate your insights. I see on screen there, it says Paul Pittman at thehumanwell.com. If somebody wants to talk to you about some of these practices or how to convert their organizations and with some of the ideas you've talked about today, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is that it?
That's it. My email address, Sam. Yeah, so they can reach me on that. There's all the rest of social media, they'll find me.
All right, so that's thehumanwell.com. I hope. Listen, this has spurred so many other ideas in terms of how do we make that transition. Just the idea of ergonomics and at home, and making sure that we're covering that and teaching that or potentially supplying that so that there isn't an effect on our benefits plan and the costs around that. That just blew my mind. I said, oh my God, we're not doing that. That's a whole other hour that I have to talk about and think about that. So there's so many more of these sessions that I want to have. I hope I can entice you guys to come back and join me in the future at some point.
For sure. Look forward to it.
Thank you for everybody. And thanks to all of you that listened live and or are listening to this on the podcast or in video in our resources section on the 17thfloor.com. A quick reminder that it is open. Now, we were in beta for a number of years, so we are now finally open to the entire community of HR, accounting, and payroll professionals. Jump in on the comments. Tell us what you think. What have your experiences been? Check out the forum where a lot of these conversations are happening in real time right now. and work with each other. Let's learn from each other. So check us out on the 17thfloor.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.
See you.